This video is sponsored by Bespoke Post. In the spring of 1945, intelligence officers from the U.S. Army Air Forces received several unexpected reconnaissance images. At the time, Japan's aviation industry had dramatically slowed down, barely able to produce any aircraft. However, the photos taken in Tachikawa showed a new unidentified four-engine aircraft. During World War II, the Japanese forces were able to capture several Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses during different attacks, forming a small fleet of their own, which is believed to have served research purposes. The aircraft spotted at the home base for Japan's Army Aviation Technical Research Institute was only one of many instances that prove that the Japanese used the legendary American bomber for their own advantages. Thank you to Bespoke Post for sponsoring Dark Skies. Bespoke Post is a monthly membership club delivering awesome boxes of top-shelf goods from under-the-radar brands, and it's entirely free to join. Every month, Bespoke Post introduces you to new products based on a preference quiz you complete, including outdoor gear, home and kitchen goods, barware, clothing, and even live oysters. The box lineup changes each month. This month, Dark Skies received the Trail Box that's designed especially for outdoor enthusiasts like us. It includes the sturdy gut hook knife that's perfect for hunting and fishing, or any chores around the camp, a sturdy, water-resistant field box to house our outdoor gear, a pocket saw that slices through wood, PVC, bones, and metal, a life-saving paracord bracelet, and Brandon Leonard's book, Surviving the Great Outdoors, stuffed full of indispensable survival tips. The best part of Bespoke Post is that you get to preview your box before it's shipped, before deciding if you'd like to keep it, swap it for a different box, or skip the month entirely for no charge. You pay only for what you want. To get 20% off your first box, click the link in the description and enter promo code DARKSKIES20 at checkout, or go to bspk.me/darkskies20. An unexpected attack. On December 7th, 1941, a dozen Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses of the 38th and 88th Reconnaissance Squadrons departed Hamilton Field, California, and headed towards the Philippines as reinforcements. However, the group flew into Pearl Harbor just as the surprise attack was happening. Some crew members believed they were being saluted upon their arrival, but they soon realized that the harbor was under attack. 2 aircraft were damaged beyond repair. Meanwhile, the Far East Air Force had 35 B-17s based in Clark Field in the Philippines, but the War Department planned to raise that force to 165. The B-17s from the 19th Bombardment Group had arrived in October, and not long after, 2 squadrons were sent to another airfield 600 miles south of Clark. When General Lewis H. Brereton received news of the ongoing attack at Pearl Harbor, he planned to send his aircraft on several patrol missions to prevent them from being caught on the ground if the Japanese struck. The general intended to raid Japanese airfields in Formosa with his Flying Fortresses, but General Douglas MacArthur overruled his plans. A series of disputes and discussions then ensued as confusing reports of air attacks started to come in. By the time the sortie was authorized and the Americans were refueling and rearming, the Japanese bombers arrived and wiped out the fleet of B-17s and the escorting Warhawk fighters. On the first strike alone, the Far East Air Force lost half its aircraft. Most of them were shattered to pieces. Despite the attempts of several mechanics, they only managed to reassemble 3 aircraft from scavenging pieces. The enemy then continued their assault, and soon, troops would land to the north as well. 3 days later, only a dozen operational B-17s from the 19th Group were left, and they were subsequently sent to Darwin, Australia. Then, a few days after Christmas, the field was abandoned to the mercy of the Japanese. A Japanese opportunity. When Imperial Japan took over the Philippine Islands in December of 1941, a group of experts from the GIKEN, the Army Aviation Technical Research Institute, arrived in the area with the purpose of digging up clues about their enemy's technological and military advancements. As these Japanese experts analyzed the wrecked aircraft and collected pieces and weapons, one model particularly captured their attention. The brand new B-17E Flying Fortress had been widely featured in Japanese publications a few months earlier, and although there were no E models at Clark Field, the Japanese discovered the B-17D's turbochargers among the rubble. They then retrieved all the salvageable parts and launched a second phase of the operation. This consisted of assembling an operating B-17 for themselves. Not long after, the first model was deemed airworthy, and its American insignia was covered by the rising sun emblem to identify its new proprietaries. However, the Flying Fortress still displayed its serial number, 403095. A specialized aircrew would then come from the home islands to take the exemplar to Japan. Captured in Indonesia. In early 1942, a mixed force of B-17s arrived in Java, Indonesia, but it wasn't long before they were defeated. By March, the last US bomber escaped from the island, running from the Japanese advance. Then the Dutch shattered the airfield. While the Allies believed that they were only leaving scrap behind them, the Japanese soon came across building material. Even worse, they were able to secure the remains of 15 B-17Es. Still enraptured from the success of the earlier model rebuilt in the Philippines, the Japanese quickly began reassembling this more sophisticated version of the Flying Fortress. The Japanese technicians began unraveling the mysteries of the B-17E's advanced systems by exploiting captured mechanics that included Dutch and natives who had been forced into service at the Allied facilities. An aircraft with serial number 412471 was then found at Median Field in satisfactory conditions despite its missing nose section and engines. In addition, another E-model was found in irreparable condition not far from there. Asahi Press aviation editor Toro Saito toured the captured bases in Java and counted no less than 4 E-models being repaired in Malang, Cirebon, and Bandung. He then wrote, quote, "The maintenance facilities for the B-17 in Java were excellent for that time and existing conditions. It appeared that Bandung Field was the main maintenance base for the Americans, and it was here that our technicians from the Giken performed their initial flight evaluation tests on these newest of American warbirds." In May of the same year, aviation magazine Koku Asahi published an article covering the American aircraft that was written by Hisunoujo Ozawa, a Mitsubishi engineer. Mitsubishi dismissed the B-17's latest version, writing, quote, "The B-17E was merely modifications made to an old design that first flew in 1935. Martin B-10s and Handley Page Hayfords of the same vintage as the original design of the Fortress had already been phased out of service. However, the engineer admitted that the aircraft was based on an exceptional design, and further improvements had fashioned a first-line combat aircraft." Another article by Shizuo Kikuhara praised American engineers for the simplicity of the cockpit compared to the volume of the B-17, stating, quote, "They have perfected the subsystems of this bomber to such a degree that a minimum of controls are needed in the cockpit. This feature aids in-flight control simplification and allows the pilot to turn his attention to other tasks that can be critical in combat situations." Findings: 2 B-17s had been rebuilt and tested in Java before 1942 ended. An elaborate plan was then hatched to fly them to the home islands by way of Singapore, and the air defense was alerted so they didn't accidentally shoot them down. By the spring of 1943, the B-17s were already in Tachikawa Air Base. A specialized team of aeronautical engineers then evaluated the aircraft. All systems were analyzed and every component was studied, with some even sent to other experts for further evaluation. A series of flight tests then followed. The Japanese had also secured a Norden bomb site, and they matched it with the B-17E and used the Sperry automatic flight control system to analyze it. While evaluating the bomb site, the Japanese concluded that their system was superior to the Americans. They then designed a more efficient bomb-aligning instrument with the knowledge learned from the Norden model. The gunnery equipment was also studied, but the extensive research on the American aircraft had little impact on Japanese bomber designs. In fact, their Nakajima G-8N bomber was more advanced than the B-17s when it came to the structure, but there is evidence that the Flying Fortress did influence a number of components in more modern Japanese models. In addition, there were several failed attempts to perfect the turbocharger, and several neat designs weren't able to meet their potential due to engine underperformance. By then, the Japanese had the necessary knowledge to produce efficient turbocharged engines, but they had no means to collect the required materials. In reality, the B-17's fire control system was highly sophisticated by their standards, but the Imperial Navy perfected the same system for their G-8N. An automatic computing gun sight was also developed based on the B-17 for later fighter aircraft. Ultimately, the Japanese realized that they did have some technical advantage over the Americans on several fronts. However, inadequate materials coupled with poor production and the abrupt end of the war did not allow them to apply the research on the battlefield. In the fall of 1943, 3 of the Flying Fortresses were transported to Fusa Airfield, and 2 of them visited the main heavy bomber base in Hamamatsu the following summer for unknown reasons. While the B-17's primary use was in testing and development, they were also featured in military training films, with the aircraft proudly displaying the U.S. colors once again. In early 1944, one of the B-17Es had an accident during takeoff for an evaluation flight out of Fusa and sustained enough damage to ground it. After the war ended, reconnaissance images showed a fortress at Urumagawa Airfield, and it's believed it was this damaged aircraft. Another B-17 appeared in more images taken in Tachikawa around the same time, but after coming back about a week later, it wasn't there anymore, never to be seen again. The third one's location remains unknown, but it is speculated that it was lost during a fire in a hangar at Tokorozawa. A clue. After a photo reconnaissance mission near the Japanese capital in May of 1945, the U.S. Army Air Force's intelligence officers were puzzled. The imagery, taken at the home base of the enemy's Army Aviation Technical Research Institute in Tachikawa, showed an unidentified aircraft that appeared to be a 4-engine bomber of transport. However, the Americans weren't able to identify what it was until after the war ended. At the time, the Japanese aviation industry was being harassed by B-29s, which kept aircraft production at bay. Hence, American officers were highly intrigued by the mysterious aircraft in the pictures. Further analysis determined that the aircraft had a wingspan of about 104 feet, and it was subsequently codenamed Tachikawa Field 104. That's about everything the experts could figure out about the discovery, but they soon realized that it was actually one of their own old models. To this day, there are very few indicators about the whereabouts of many of the captured fortresses, but there is no doubt that they were used for research purposes by the Japanese military. The amount of influence they had on their future creations remains unknown. Thank you for watching our video. Please hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed it, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to all our Dark Documentaries channels for more stories about the World Wars.